Hello, Dreamcatchers, and welcome to the Writer's Haven. I am your host, V. Helena, and did you know that April is National Poetry Month? Not too many people do, but my studio guests are uniquely aware of the celebration because we are published poets and know a thing or two about poetry writing and storytelling. This is the first of a two-part series entitled Poetry Flow, and I've brought together my good friends Monda Webb, Charles Stokes, and Hermond Palmer to talk about this genre of writing and our passion for it. Monda, who you may remember from season 1, is not only a filmmaker and novelist, but she's also written 2 books of poetry, A Peek into My Soul and Life is Like a Soul Train Line. Charles was also featured in season 1 and shared his process for writing his first book, Love, Pain, and Poetry, which was followed up by his second book, Love, Pain, and Poetry 2, The Depression and Its Acceptance. And I cannot wait to talk to him about his latest. Hermond dropped into the Haven a few months ago and shared his multiple outlets of storytelling, including songwriting, playwriting, and the jewels of his first book, Echoes from the Quiet That I Keep. His second book, Open Mic, Words to Fill the Light in You, was recently released. Now, some of you may be acquainted with my 2 books of poetry and short stories, His Love is Freedom and His Love is Complete. So I will be joining the discussion with my fellow poets today, so you're in for a rare treat. So let's welcome back poets Monda, Charles, and Hermond to the Haven. Welcome back, welcome back. So did you guys know that April was National Poetry Month?
Absolutely.
Full disclosure, I totally did not. In my preparation for our show today, I was just doing some research, and I was elated actually to find out that April was National Poetry Month. And I was thinking, now should I trick them and have them think that I purposely scheduled this for April? But no, full disclosure, I did not know that. But along those lines, who are some of your favorite poets?
James Baldwin.
Nikki Giovanni.
Of course.
Langston Hughes.
Sonia Sanchez for me.
Wow.
And
right now, I would have to say K.Y. Robinson,
okay.
Author of The Chaos is Longing.
Okay. So do any of those poets have any of them influenced your writing in any way, do you think? Have you read their stuff and studied their stuff so much that you see some of their influences in your own writing?
Absolutely, for me. Nikki Giovanni is wonderful. She is an inspiration to me. Mm-hmm. And she has one piece called Quilt. And I was so taken by that piece that I wrote a version called Quilted Embrace. And I sent it to her and asked her permission, could I dedicate it to her? And she said absolutely. So
wow.
She's been a tremendous influence in my work.
Okay.
Yeah, me too. She's famous. Nikki Giovanni is famous for a poem called Ego Trippin'. You all might remember.
Absolutely.
And so I wrote an homage to her with Ego Trippin' as well. But I'm really influenced by the 60s, the poets of the 60s. When I was younger, I got Dudley Randall's The Poets and the Renaissance poets. I was so impressed with their fire, with their passion, and with their commitment to try to change the world one word at a time. So, that's the genre that kind of influenced my poetry.
Okay.
Well, I would say that I have a lot of influences, and K.Y. Robinson might not be the total influence. I take influence from music. I take influence from poets that I meet, spoken word artists. But her book has a flow to it that it touches you. It reaches into your chest and just pulls everything out of you. So, and I read it once a month.
Okay. Well, I purposely, because I know other poets, but you guys are my favorites. And in addition to that, the way that you write is so uniquely different. And so I wanted to have us all come together and just kind of talk about our poetry and our process, because they are uniquely different. And having interviewed you all, even your process for writing is different. So I really want to delve into that. But first, I want to just, for our dream catchers that are watching, the Academy of American Poets created National Poetry Month back in 1996 as a means to stir awareness of poetry and the great poets of our time and the poets before us. And so I encourage you to go to their website, www.poets.org, to get more information about that organization and how you, those of you who are poets, can really connect in through that organization on all these resources that are available to you. And we'll also give that information again at the end of the show. So in talking about those poets that inspire you and your process, and two of you have written works that were in homage to them, what were some of the styles and techniques that you saw in their writing that influenced you? And then, because I'm in a unique position having read the three of you, I'm going to also share with you what I see in your poetry writing. So Monda, did you want to kick off the discussion on that?
I would say I don't look at it like, pentameter, AB rhyme scheme. I look at rhythm. I look at the music that comes from reading the poetry and how it impacts me emotionally.
Right. And if I could add that you are the consummate storyteller.
And I like to use every sense. What does a person see? What do they smell? What do they hear?
Yes.
If they could touch it, what would it be like if they touched it? So that they are present when they're either reading it or when they're hearing it.
Yes. Charles?
So my style has been ever changing since we first met. I've been using a lot of alliteration. My process has changed. The times that I write has changed, and what I'm writing about is changing. I wouldn't be able to focus in on any one thing because my first and second books look totally different.
We're going to talk more about that. So put a pin in that, because what you did, in the first book was pretty extraordinary. And Hermond?
For me, I like to think of myself as a painter, and the page is my canvas and the words are my paint. And when I write, I want to use a lot of images that are universal, so that when you read it, you immediately identify with what I'm saying. When I write, I want to do one of four things. I want to inspire, I want to make you feel something, I want to make you think, and then at the end I want you to do something. Whatever comes to mind, whatever makes you feel good, but I want to make sure I touch your soul in a way that is positive, but also gets a message across. And as I shared with you when we met before, I also write with the young people in mind because I want to inspire them. It's important that we provide imagery that lets them know you're important, that you have meaning, you have purpose, and you have potential. And our mission as the elder is to make sure you realize that potential. And if these words can help facilitate that, then I'm very pleased.
Okay. So let's talk about inspiration. And you just said that writing for the youth of the world and providing them with encouragement is one of the things that I know we talked about that you, but I know that you have other elements that you talk about.
That's the think,
as well.
feel, and do part.
Okay, so let's talk about those things that inspires you in your day-to-day as you're writing about whatever it is that, whatever your muse is, whatever touches you in that day. So Monda, did you want to kick that off?
It varies. Sometimes it's love or the act of falling in love, whether it be with a person, place, or thing. Other times it's if I may hear someone sing and their voice is so beautiful that it transports me, and I get a kind of tickling inside of my gut that says, okay, it's time for something to come out. It could be dreams. Or it could be something that I've seen on the news that makes me mad as hell. And I want to, and I need to express that. And once I've written it, I'm fine. But I have a poem in A Peek Into My Soul that says, writing is my way of crying, of analyzing my thoughts, of transcending my dying. And so in doing so, it's kind of healing for me in order to.
Okay, and it was one thing that you just said that triggered another question for me. And you know, you guys can jump in at any time. Don't feel like we have to go one at a time. Just jump in. So do you write a collection or a series of poems at one time, or do you, at the time that you jump up one day and say, oh, I got 40 poems here, let me just put this all together? It could be 2 years from the start of the first one, and you just put that collection together and publish. How does that process work for each of you?
Well, for me, I try to write every day. And when I write, I don't edit, but I want to write something that's significant, something that I know people will get and it will move them. And I'll look back, and when I think I have enough quality pieces, then I'll start thinking about, okay, I do sections. Do I have enough to have several sections that are of interest to a prospective public? Because it's one thing for me to write it, but it has to have interest to the reader, because I want them to feel rewarded for investing in me.
Right, but are you thinking that at the time that you're creating?
No, I'm just going by what I want. What's I think poetry is your spirit speaking to the world. I think when you have the ability to just be still and be quiet and hear what your soul is saying, you get moved to the point where you're like, I have to share this. And so that's when you put it out and you start writing, and you're like, okay, now each poem reflects a different mood or state of mind that you're in. And for me, love, the Black experience, lately, all about the Black experience because of what you see on the news, and it's going hardcore. I'm in overdrive, so I'm like, okay, I've got a lot of this section, a little bit in these. So I'm like, okay, I can't do anything now unless I do a complete book on the Black experience, which I'm quickly getting to. So that's my journey now.
So I do put my work into collections. So there's book 1, there's book 2, there's a Pisces book, there's a political book, there's a social justice book. Sometimes they blur lines, and I switch poems in between them, but I keep them all cataloged in my notes, and when I'm ready, I print them all out, I put them in a file, and I get ready and I go.
So are you writing to the collection? Like, so for the Love, Pain, and Poetry book, you know, you had an overarching theme. And so were you writing to that theme consistently, or were there some, you know, Pisces that kind of jumped into the way?
So to let the cat out of the bag, mostly everything written in all of the books, they were Pisces. I mean, even my mom's a Pisces, so it's so almost everything in that book, except for maybe 4 poems. All
so
3 books,
the collection, you are intentionally writing to the collection at the time that you're writing that piece. Okay.
No.
So like Hermond, and it also sounds like with Monda, that whatever is hitting you on that day, you're putting it down on paper, and then once you have a whole bunch together, then you're dividing it into collections.
No, I stick them in a collection right away. So
okay.
I stick them right in a collection, because if you edit it, you might change it depending on what, but I put it right in a collection. It has to go somewhere. Otherwise, it'll get lost, because I write a lot.
Right. Okay.
I'm with Charles. I'm afraid to try to direct my writing in a specific direction. I have to just listen to what I'm feeling, because then it's almost like it's not genuine. And I want to be genuine in everything I do. So if I try to direct it, for me, it feels artificial, and it won't come out with the quality that I hope to produce.
You feel the same way, Monda?
Well, from my perspective, I have a little bit of both. So with the Beacon to My Soul, those were poems that I had written from the time I was 7 or 8, bits and pieces written on napkins, pieces of paper, before we had computers, on a typewriter. And then when it came to life, it's like a Soul Train line. It just turns out that a lot of it was more thematic. You know, I took dances that they did in the Soul Train line, and I associated them with a particular part of the book. So the bump was like lovemaking, or. But at any rate, I have been thinking of the next poetry book, which will be a love letter to God. So it'll be all poems that are that are just praising my Creator in one way or another, what I'm thankful for, what I'm grateful for. So I look at that as something that I know that there's one theme, and that theme is the Almighty. So I'm going to put them over there. But in the meantime, so I guess I'm prompted both ways in a sense. Yeah.
And then it could be, and I'm like Monda, you know, when I wrote those two books, like His Love is Freedom is poetry that talks about how freeing it is to know that God is with you in every aspect of your day. So that is a big umbrella, and a lot of things can fall under that umbrella. And I was very intentional in how I wrote that poetry. Then His Love is Complete is about how His love and the completeness of it as it relates to marriage and that bond and couples and loving in that way. And so that was very intentional. It was very easy for me to just flow right into it. And, you know, and each relationship, married or not, goes through seasons. So that's how I categorized it. You know, in the summer it's hot, it's sizzly. In the spring it's new, right? In the fall, it's like, okay, you got 3 heads. I thought you only had 1. And then in the winter, it's like, you know, either it's going to die on the vine or there's a renewal that comes with winter too. There's like a dying and a rebirth. So it was very easy for me to, like, under that umbrella, just write towards that and not be distracted by any other thing. Not even with the Love is Freedom book. It was just all about complete. So I guess I do what both of you do, but if I'm writing, or, you know, the two sides of it, but if I'm writing intentionally, it's all about that. And that's probably true with your storytelling, your novel writing, your filmmaking, your script writing. You know, when you're focused on that project, it's very easy for you to be very, not distracted by anything else, but really focused on beginning, middle, end. Would you say that's true?
There is a tunnel vision that comes with it. Sometimes you have to step back. Step back. There's some authors who write, or poets. I don't want to read anybody else while I'm working because I don't want to be influenced by it. But I find that it can be helpful, especially because, I mean, we all have something that makes us uniquely who we are and our style. So I have a goal in mind of when I want to finish. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes life gets in the way, but then that life has a way of, I'm glad that happened because now I can incorporate that. You needed to experience. That's correct. So I kind of let things happen organically.
Yes, I've experienced that. I will not read or listen to a poet's work while I'm writing because in the Depression and Its Acceptance, somebody did a metaphor, and I used similar words to the metaphor. I just used completely different. The poet uses period and sentence when talking about prison. I use it differently. I use period and sentence, but I'm talking about something else. And I had to show it to him before I released the book. I emailed him. I said, hey, I wrote this. I like it. Can I use it? I gave him a free book, of course. He didn't have a problem with it. And, you know, but it happens. I hate reading other poets when it's just a challenge to not learn or be influenced by their work.
Right. And it's also good to, and this is true for novel writing too, to read good poetry and good literature. You know, because you can be so enriched by reading those great works of people. When I'm not writing my own and I am opening myself up to other influences and other people's poetry, it has to be someone that who inspires me in some way.
Yeah, I would think that, and even though James Baldwin isn't known as a poet, his writing is poetry.
Oh yeah.
Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, they have a way of using words so sparingly, but cuts through you just like just like a two-edged sword, right? Yeah. Just like, oh my gosh, that's power in the word, and the power in the word, and power in the worlds that they create in using those words. So I think even though we've got these famous novelists out there, they're truly poets at heart.
Yeah. I would have to agree
I'm a
with
little
that.
different, I guess. I like being exposed
Do tell.
to other
Yeah.
poets and artists, because if I read something that's inspiring to me that was written by somebody else, it's almost like an invitation for me to explore that emotion that they evoked. And then how might I go about trying to evoke that in my reader? It gives me an opportunity to explore different dimensions of my own self, and then figure out how can I bring that dimension to light for other people to experience. So
Yeah.
I'm like a sponge.
Well, Hermond, we're not saying don't read other people's
No,
work.
but
We're,
yeah.
we're
What works
just,
for
for
you.
me, you know, when I'm focused on my writing, I purposely do not read anybody, not even your stuff.
It's okay. I'm crushed, but it's okay.
Okay. All right. So we've talked about a little bit about our inspiration. Let's talk about our process, because I am in the unique position that, having spoken to the three of you, I know you've given some information about your process. I don't know necessarily your process for poetry writing, so I'm going to start with Monda, and I definitely want to hear Charles, because you changed your process from the last time you were on the show. So Monda, tell us about your process. How do you engage in that piece of your artistry?
Well, it depends again, because if someone says, Monda, can you write a, okay, let's use an example. I had a girlfriend that got married, and she said, I want you to write a poem for my husband and myself. And I said, I hadn't met him. And I thought, okay. So I said, tell me a little bit about him. I knew about her. And then I looked at the common threads that made them a match. And I wrote the poem based on how she was telling me about him, that emotion that I felt that came from her. So I guess when it comes to a process, if it's for me, like I met someone that I was attracted to not long ago, and I just wrote a poem and just sent a text. Here you go. And but that was something that was organic. It came truly from the heart and from the soul. And so the process is really just to kind of sit down and bang it out. If it's that little knocking, time for you to write. Time for, like when Prince died. When Prince died, I had to write something almost immediately. When Michael Jackson died, it took a very long time for me to process it. And then I wrote a poem that I put to music a little later in collaboration with Hermond. And it took a while, because I grew up with Michael. You know, most of us did, right?
Yeah.
And so that process was more painful. But again, it was my way of grieving. It took some time. So it just depends. Can I just sit down and write? I guess I'm pretty blessed. Yes, I can. But I'll go back to it and massage it and play with it. Maybe like you're like, okay, it's done. I'm good. But and depending goes, I'm like, I find typos, or I'm like, I think I was thinking that, but now I want to put this element in.
Right.
So I may need to sit for a while, then go back and say, okay, now I'm gonna just clean it up a little bit. And sometimes it's great when it's raw and it's, you know,
Yeah.
I'm good with that. But there are other times when I need to just, you know, do a little prettying up.
Yeah.
So it just depends.
Okay.
Yes. So my process now, I used to just write it out, fire it away, and I would go back and I would edit, I would check for rhyme schemes. Now, not so much as rhyme, but I shoot for flow. Flow is extremely important. I still rhyme, but my rhymes they're very internal. I like to keep the rhyme internal, because it takes a level of skill to hide those rhymes and put them in places where it's not awkward, or it's not, you don't want to get preschool with the rhyme. I'm triggered now. Trains in a car, not driving, certain situations just trigger me to start writing. My process is, it's evolving. I wouldn't say I changed.
You said you would say that you changed?
I wouldn't say necessarily. I wouldn't use the word change. It's evolving, and it's growth.
Is it the writing, or is it you that translates into the writing?
That's a good question. I haven't sat down and thought about that at all. But I'm not in the same place I was a year ago, so I have to find new reasons to write.
Yeah.
And when I finished up the depression and its acceptance, the last poem of the book, I'm saying I'm waving goodbye to depression. So I'm finding other reasons to write, and it's no longer depression. So, I have a lot of work, so we'll talk about it later.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, lots of triggers to writing.
Okay, okay. What about you, Mr. Hermond?
I'm open. Sometimes I can sit and just in one sitting write out a piece. And there are other times where it might take me 2-3 weeks. And what I do is I write it on my computer, and you'll see in the file of a particular piece, I might have 20 versions. And some of the revisions, I might have just changed one word. But that one word in my mind was so significant that it was worth waiting. So I don't want to rush the process. I want to make sure that there's a certain rhythm to it. It doesn't necessarily rhyme, but I feel a rhythm.
Is that the same as flow?
I guess you could call it flow, but and it's something I can't even put in words, but I feel it. When I read it and I feel it, I'm like, okay, we're there. And to check it, I get my son or my daughter to read it, and I'm like, they're like, oh no, this is good. Because sometimes I worry, am I just writing for myself? Is this just something like that only I get, or can anybody else be like, and because there's such an age difference and an experience difference, if they can read it and say, yeah, it's good, then it must be good. So whether it's one piece or one piece in one sitting or 2 weeks, I might start at the beginning, I might start at the end, I might hear a phrase that I'm like, ooh, I have to do something with that. Or I might have seen something in the street, I'm like, that image, I have to do something with that image. And then I play with it. I'm like, okay, I got the image. How do I want to express it? What visuals do I want to call and play? What sounds, like you were saying? What do we hear? What do we taste?
What do we see?
How can I get you in the moment that I was so that you can appreciate what I'm trying to share?
Okay.
So I'm all over the place.
No, that's nice. And one thing, and we'll get more deep into this also in the second segment, is not only the flow and the rhythm that you're talking about, but when you're putting it on the page, because you're not there to read it to the reader.
Right.
So how you format it onto the page is really, really key too. So we're going to talk about that in our second segment. So Dreamcatchers, tune in next week for part 2 of our discussion with poets Monda Webb, Charles Stokes, and Hermond Palmer. You don't want to miss our discussion on broader topics in poetry writing and more tips to infuse into your own writing practice. Don't forget to hit us up on social media or catch missed shows on YouTube, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Sonos, Alexa, SoundCloud, and Spotify. Just search for us under the title The Writer's Haven Show with V. Helena and subscribe so you'll never miss a show. See you next time in the Haven, and until then, catch fire on purpose.
And with a little help, I made it.